Las Vegas, 1977. Elvis Presley's mansion was silent for the first time, but when Priscilla opened a drawer in his private dressing room, she found a sealed envelope marked only with her name. Inside were words that spoke of love, regret, and truth. They weren't fame. They weren't farewell. They were something he had never said aloud. What she read shattered her completely. June 26, 1977, Market Square Arena, Indianapolis. The lights exploded in gold as more than 18,000 people screamed his name. The air was thick with perfume, sweat, and the static of microphones testing against echoing steel walls. Elvis stepped into that light like a man walking into his own shadow. The blue jumpsuit clung to him. The rhinestones caught every flash from the crowd, but his eyes, deep, tired, almost glassy, looked far away. He smiled anyway. That smile had carried America through wars and heartbreaks. Tonight it trembled. The band started C.C. Rider. The drums rolled like thunder across the seats. Elvis lifted the mic, and for a moment his voice soared. Rich, warm, alive. But halfway through the song, a faint crack slipped out. He winced. The crowd didn't notice, but his longtime road manager, Joe Esposito, did. Joe stood just off stage, his arms folded tight. Later, he would whisper to a friend. He looked like he was saying goodbye. When Can't Help Falling in Love began, every camera in the building flashed. The crowd became a sea of light. Yet behind that brightness, his hands trembled. He held the microphone close, then lowered it just a little, as if the song was no longer for them, but for someone he missed. People still talk about that night. Some say he smiled at a girl in the front row. Others swear he looked toward the rafters, toward something higher. Whatever it was, his final bow lasted longer than usual. The applause went on for 5 full minutes. He nodded, thanked them, and whispered something no mic caught. Only Joe heard it. That's all right now. Backstage, sweat soaked his collar. He asked Joe for a towel, then for something strange, a sheet of plain paper and a pen. Joe hesitated. Elvis rarely wrote anything by hand. His staff handled all notes, set lists, letters. But that night he insisted. Joe handed him the paper. Elvis sat down on the dressing room chair, the same one with the cracked mirror and a lipstick smudge from some forgotten showgirl years before. He stared at the page. The pen didn't move for almost a minute. Then, quietly, he began to write. Outside, the crowd still chanted his name. Security guards were closing the arena gates. The echo of voices bounced down the concrete halls like ghosts that wouldn't leave. And still he wrote, slow, careful, every stroke deliberate. When Joe came back, Elvis folded the paper once, slid it into a small white envelope, and pressed his thumb over the flap. Send this to Graceland, he said. Keep it safe. Joe didn't ask questions. He tucked it into Elvis's briefcase with his Bible and sunglasses. Later, when the jet flew them home to Memphis, that envelope rested beside his seat the whole way. No one knew what was inside. Not then. Not even Joe. The next morning, Elvis woke early. He walked through Graceland's quiet halls, touching picture frames like they were old friends. Lisa Marie's laughter echoed from memory, not from the room. He hummed a gospel tune under his breath. A storm was rolling over Tennessee, grey clouds pressing against the sky. He looked tired, but peaceful, as if something had been settled on that piece of paper. People close to him said later he was different after that show. Softer, more reflective. He talked less about tours and more about family. He spoke Priscilla's name again, for the first time in years. What had he written that night to change his heart so deeply? That paper remained sealed. The world would not see it for weeks, not until after the sirens, after the news flashes, after the king of rock was gone. He didn't leave a will that spoke of love. He left a letter, and it waited, hidden in the one place no one thought to look. Would you have opened it if it had your name on it? August 1977. Graceland was silent except for the sound of footsteps on marble floors. The world had lost its king. Flowers covered the gates, hundreds deep. Fans stood outside with candles, some singing, some sobbing. The mansion felt less like a home and more like a memory trapped in time. Inside, Priscilla moved slowly through each room. The air still carried his cologne, musk and leather, faint but there. Every photo she passed showed the same man, the smile, the sparkle, the myth. But none of those pictures showed who he truly was. She had seen that version, the man behind the crown. It was early morning when she entered his private dressing room. The mirror lights were still burned out from the last show. Makeup brushes, hair gel, and old ticket stubs littered the counter. The room smelled like dust and faded perfume. Then she noticed something small, a mahogany drawer under the mirror, one she'd never seen before. The brass handle was dull with age. She pulled it gently. It stuck halfway, like it hadn't been opened in years. Inside lay a few simple things: his signature sunglasses, a worn Bible, a folded scarf with a faint stain of stage makeup. And then the envelope. White, plain, sealed. Across the front, in blue ink, one word: Scylla. Her breath caught. Her hands began to shake. She sat down, staring at it as if it might vanish. The handwriting was unmistakable, slanted, bold, confident. His. She didn't open it. Not yet. She couldn't. Instead, she placed it gently on the counter and just stared at it, feeling a weight in her chest she couldn't name. Outside, the muffled sound of fans drifted through the windows, singing, "Love Me Tender." She whispered, "What did you do, Elvis?" Hours passed. The letter stayed unopened. She told herself it was out of respect. Truthfully, it was fear. Fear of what the words might do to her heart. Fear that it might be an apology, or a goodbye she wasn't ready for. That night, she couldn't sleep. The house creaked. Thunder rolled over Memphis. Every sound seemed to come from that room, from that drawer, from that envelope. She finally stood, barefoot, walking through the hallway, with only the light of the moon reflecting off framed gold records. The drawer glowed faintly under the mirror bulb she hadn't turned off. The envelope waited, still untouched. She picked it up again, feeling the texture of the paper. Her fingers traced the seal. She almost tore it open, almost, but she stopped, because once opened, the mystery would be gone. She pressed it to her chest, whispered a prayer, and slid it into her purse instead. The next morning, Vernon Presley, Elvis's father, found her sitting on the porch swing, holding a cup of untouched coffee. He asked softly, "You sleep at all?" She shook her head. He looked down at her purse and said, "He left you something, didn't he?" Her eyes filled with tears. "I think so," Vernon nodded, his own voice trembling. When he knew he was in pain, he started writing again. I think he wanted to make things right. The words hit her like lightning. He'd written more than one note? How many? And where were they now? She reached into her purse, fingertips brushing the letter again. The seal held firm, as if guarding a secret not ready to be heard. Some truths don't come easy. Some find you when you least expect it. She closed her eyes and whispered, "Not yet." The longer she waited, the louder that envelope seemed to whisper her name. Would you open it? If the words inside could break you forever. By September 1977, Graceland had become a shrine. The gates no longer opened for limousines and laughter, only for mourners and media trucks. Flashbulbs burst like fireworks. Strangers pressed their hands to the iron gates, whispering prayers into the humid Memphis air. Inside, everything looked the same, yet nothing felt alive. The walls seemed to hum with echoes, the distant notes of a piano, the faint echo of laughter that wasn't really there. Priscilla walked those halls quietly. Her heels clicked against marble floors that once shook with music. The chandeliers reflected her face in shards of light, broken and beautiful all at once. She could still picture him walking ahead of her, humming some new tune, turning back to smile like he always did. But that smile was gone. Only its shadow remained. The letter stayed in her purse, unopened. Every time she thought of it, her chest tightened. She told herself it could wait, that she needed to breathe first, to grieve. But grief doesn't wait for permission. It finds you in the smallest things. An empty chair, a leftover jacket, a photo on the wall where the eyes almost seemed to follow you. One afternoon, as autumn leaves began to drift over the Graceland lawn, she found something strange. Behind his piano, tucked between stacks of old sheet music, was a notebook. Its pages were yellowed, edges curled. The cover read simply, 1976. She opened it. Inside were pages of thoughts. Not lyrics, not business notes, just words. His handwriting again, bold, uneven, honest. Some days I feel trapped in my own reflection. The stage cheers me, but the silence after breaks me. She saw me before the world did. I lost her because I forgot how to be him. Her hands trembled. Every line sounded like a confession. Not from the king of rock, but from the man she once knew before the fame, before the weight of it all. She read for hours, sitting cross-legged on the carpet. The light outside faded, but she didn't notice. Each page pulled her closer to the man behind the myth, the one who prayed at night for forgiveness, the one who wrote her name without realizing it. She whispered, "You were still trying, weren't you?" Her voice broke. The letter in her purse suddenly felt heavier than it ever had. Later that night, she walked outside to the meditation garden, the place where he rested. Fans had left candles, teddy bears, vinyl records. Some left letters of their own, folded carefully under flowers. She knelt, touched the cool stone, and placed her hand on the marble nameplate. Elvis Presley, it read. January 8th, 1935. August 16th, 1977. The dates felt impossible. Time shouldn't have ended there, she whispered again. What did you want me to know? A soft breeze swept through the garden, carrying the faint scent of magnolia. It felt like an answer she couldn't understand. Inside, she found Joe Esposito in the hallway. His eyes were red, his voice hoarse. He said quietly, "You ever open that envelope?" She shook her head. He hesitated, then added, "He wrote it 3 days before he died." Her heart stopped. "You're sure?" "I saw him," Joe said. He sat at his desk, looked out the window and said, "If she ever reads this, maybe she'll forgive me." The hallway went silent. Only the ticking of an old clock filled the air. 3 days. Just 3 days before his heart gave out. She turned away, gripping her purse so tightly her knuckles turned white. The envelope inside felt like it was burning through the leather. That night, she couldn't escape the thought. Every creak of the house, every whisper of wind felt like his voice trying to reach her. The radio played softly in the background, one of his old gospel tracks. She closed her eyes, listening to the words about mercy, about grace. Her tears finally came, quiet at first, then unstoppable. Maybe this letter wasn't just a goodbye. Maybe it was his final prayer. But was she ready to hear it? Would reading it bring peace? Or break her again? August 24th, 1977, 8 days after the funeral. The rain wouldn't stop. Thunder rolled over Memphis, echoing through the empty halls of Graceland. The fans had gone. The cameras had left. But Priscilla stayed, unable to leave the house that still smelled like him. Everywhere she turned, she saw traces of his life. The white piano, still open on a half-played chord. The gold record wall, catching flashes of lightning through the windows. His scarf, folded neatly beside the mirror, and her purse, sitting on the vanity, still holding the envelope. That envelope had haunted her for days. She had carried it through the quiet halls, to the kitchen, to the porch. Sometimes she would hold it just to feel its weight. Every night, she told herself, tomorrow I'll open it. But every tomorrow came and went. Tonight was different. The storm was too loud. The silence inside her was louder. She sat down at his dressing table. The light flickered once. She took out the envelope. Her fingers hesitated, trembling as thunder cracked above. Then she tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded twice. The ink had smudged slightly from his thumb. At the top, his handwriting, sharp, slanted, began, "Scylla, if you're reading this, I didn't have the courage to say it when I should have." She read on, her eyes blurring with tears. "The world knows Elvis Presley, the man in the jumpsuit, the smile, the noise. But you knew the man before all that. You knew me when I was just a scared kid from Tupelo trying to make something of himself. Her breath shook. I wanted to fix things, but I didn't know how. I hid behind the lights. I let the pills speak for me when I couldn't. I know what it cost you. I know what it cost us. The words bled truth. He wasn't writing as a legend. He was writing as a man stripped of every title. If there's another life, I hope I learn to love you right. That line stopped her. She dropped the paper and covered her face. The sound that came from her wasn't a sob. It was something deeper, an ache pulled from years of silence. For minutes, she couldn't move. The letter slid onto the floor. Her tears hit the paper, mixing with the ink, turning his words into soft blue shadows. She whispered, "Why didn't you tell me?" Lightning flashed again, lighting up the whole room. In the mirror, she caught her reflection, not as the woman she'd become, but as the girl who once waited backstage in Las Vegas, watching him shine. For the first time since his death, she felt his presence, not in memory, but in something real, almost like he was sitting beside her, whispering every word in her ear. She picked the letter up again and kept reading. They say the stage gives you life, but it takes something every night you walk on it. I gave everything, Scylla, even the parts that belong to you. He signed it with just his first name. No flourish, no love always, just Elvis. Her hands shook as she refolded the paper, pressing her thumb over the smudge like she could still touch him. Down the hall, the grandfather clock struck midnight. The sound felt final, like a curtain closing. She walked to the window. The rain had stopped. The city was dark except for the glow of the streetlights reflecting off puddles. Somewhere out there, radio stations were still playing his songs. The whole world still heard his voice. But tonight, she had something no one else had. His silence. She turned, ready to put the letter away, when she noticed a movement outside. A small group of fans standing at the gate, candles flickering in the wind. One of them held a sign. "We love you, Elvis." Her throat tightened. For years, she had resented that crowd. The constant flashbulbs, the noise, the way they took more than they gave. But now she understood. They were grieving the same way she was, reaching for a ghost that would never come back. She pressed the letter against her chest and whispered, "You're forgiven." The next morning, she found Joe Esposito waiting by the stairs. He looked pale, tired. She handed him the envelope and said quietly, "He wanted you to see this." Joe unfolded the paper, read a few lines, and then looked up with tears in his eyes. "He wrote this just days before he passed. He told me, if she ever reads it, maybe she'll forgive me." She nodded. "I already did, but fate wasn't done with that letter. Joe promised to lock it away, to protect it from the press, from the world that had already taken too much. But somehow, news of its existence spread. A studio technician overheard. A reporter called. A headline whispered across Memphis before breakfast. Elvis's last words to Priscilla. Hidden love, letter found. By evening, fans camped outside the gates again, holding signs that read, "Show us the letter." The sacred had become spectacle. Again. Priscilla stood behind the curtain, clutching the letter in her hand. The noise outside was deafening. She closed her eyes and whispered, "Not this time." She tore the copy Joe had made and placed the original in a small wooden box lined with velvet. The same box that once held Elvis's wedding ring. Then she locked it away. The world would not see it. Not yet. But secrets have a way of surfacing, and when this one did, it would change everything again. 82. 5 years after his death. Graceland had turned from home to museum. Tour buses lined the drive. Cameras flashed where once only laughter lived. The world had begun to heal, but the myth of Elvis Presley had only grown. Fans still whispered about the lost letter, the one Priscilla refused to share. Then one summer morning, the rumor became real. The Memphis Press Scimitar ran a small front-page teaser. Private letter from Elvis Presley to Priscilla. confirmed by Inner Circle. The words spread like wildfire. Radio hosts debated it live, fans called in crying. By noon, hundreds gathered outside Graceland again, holding posters. Let us see his truth. Priscilla sat inside her office, watching the chaos from the window. Her assistant placed the newspaper on her desk. She stared at it for a long time, then quietly said, "He deserved peace. They won't even let him rest." That night her phone rang. It was Joe Esposito. His voice was low, guilty. "Scylla, I think I know how they found out." "What do you mean?" "There was a copy made for the archives. Someone took a photo. It wasn't me." "I swear," she didn't yell. She didn't cry. She just whispered, "Of course they did." The next morning, a journalist called, offering money, real money, for a copy. Others offered more. One even said, "If you don't share it, someone else will." She hung up without a word. By that weekend, reporters camped outside her gate. They shouted questions, waved microphones, even tried to bribe security. One asked, "Priscilla, was it an apology or a love letter?" She ignored them all. But inside, she was breaking. Because that letter wasn't written for the world. It was written for one heart, not millions. And yet, the story wouldn't stop. The public wanted closure. They wanted proof. They wanted the king's last confession. Finally, during a private anniversary event at Graceland, she made a decision. The lights dimmed. The crowd fell silent. Around 50 close friends, family, and old bandmates gathered inside the music room, where the white piano stood gleaming. Priscilla walked in, wearing black. In her hands, the original letter, still folded. She took a deep breath and said softly, "He never meant for anyone to hear this, but maybe it's time the world understands who he really was." You could hear a pin drop. She began to read. Her voice trembled at first, then grew steady. "Scylla, if you're reading this, I didn't have the courage to say it." Every word filled the room with silence. Some closed their eyes, others wept quietly. When she reached the final line, "If there's another life, I hope I learn to love you right," a hush fell over everyone. No applause, no cheers, just tears. For the first time, people didn't see Elvis the legend. They saw Elvis the man, flawed, lonely, loving, human. Priscilla folded the paper, held it to her chest and whispered, "That's all the world needs to know." Outside, the crowd didn't know what had happened, but the energy shifted. Word spread fast. She read it. She finally read it. The next morning, newspapers changed tone. Instead of gossip, they printed grace. One headline read, "Elvis's final words, not for fame, but forgiveness." That line changed everything. Fans began leaving handwritten letters at Graceland's gates. Not to him, but to the people they'd hurt, the ones they'd lost. A movement began, quiet but powerful, built not around music, but around mercy. Priscilla watched from her window as thousands came, not to idolize him, but to heal through him. And from that moment, she knew what she had to do next. Something bigger than a letter. Something that would turn pain into purpose. Something that would make sure the man she loved would finally rest in peace. 7 years after the world lost him. The air in Memphis felt lighter that spring. The crowds outside Graceland had changed. They weren't crying anymore. They came with flowers, guitars, and quiet smiles. Children who'd never met him sang along to his old songs. The pain had softened into remembrance. Priscilla watched from the upstairs window. The letter, framed in glass, rested on her desk. She had promised never to sell it, never to let it leave the house again. It wasn't for the world. It was for peace. That year, she founded Elvis Presley Enterprises. Reporters called it a business move. They were wrong. For her, it was a promise, a way to protect his name from being turned into noise. Every decision, every museum display, every candlelight vigil was shaped by that letter's truth. Love, regret, and redemption. People came from across the world to stand in silence at his grave. Some carried copies of the letter printed in newspapers. Others brought notes of their own. One fan from Japan wrote, "He taught me that even kings can be kind." Each August, on the anniversary of his death, Priscilla placed a single white rose and a sealed envelope at the base of his grave. The same words, always written inside. "If there's another life, I hope I learn to love you right." The letter had stopped being his. It had become theirs. Even the staff began calling it the love letter year. The halls felt alive again. Not haunted, but holy. You could hear laughter during tours, see people holding hands, whispering thank yous as they left. A few years later, a small plaque was placed near the meditation garden. It read, "For every word left unspoken, let this place be forgiveness." It wasn't official. A fan club had made it and left it overnight. But Priscilla never had it removed. She said it belonged there. Sometimes, on quiet mornings, workers claimed they could hear faint piano notes drifting through the mansion. Just a few soft chords, never loud enough to be certain. Others swore they heard footsteps on the stairs when the house was empty. No one was afraid. If anything, they smiled, because it felt like he'd finally come home. Priscilla continued her work for decades. She gave interviews, wrote memoirs, shared memories, but never again mentioned the letter in full. When asked why, she always said the same thing. Some things should stay between two souls. The world respected that. For once, it let love stay private. In 2007, on the 30th anniversary, over 75,000 fans gathered outside Graceland, candles stretched for blocks. When the clock struck midnight, the crowd went silent. No music, no speaking, just light. Upstairs, Priscilla watched from the balcony, clutching the same framed letter. She whispered, "They finally understand. Love doesn't end when life does. It changes shape, becomes memory, becomes legacy, and sometimes it lives forever in a single line of ink." Years later, when Priscilla spoke at an anniversary tribute in Memphis, the crowd filled the night air with candles. The lights shimmered like stars across the lawn. She didn't bring the letter with her this time. She didn't need to. Its words had already done their work. She stepped to the microphone, looked over thousands of faces, and said quietly, "Elvis lived loud, but what he left behind wasn't noise. It was truth." The crowd hushed. She paused, smiling softly. "He taught me something I didn't understand until long after he was gone. That love isn't about forever. It's about being honest while we still have time." A faint breeze swept through the garden. You could almost hear his voice echo in it. She took a deep breath. If you love someone, tell them. Don't wait until it's too late. Because words left unsaid don't disappear. They echo. The audience didn't clap. They just listened, still, reverent. Even the cicadas seemed to stop. When she finished, the candles flickered brighter. Someone started singing "Love Me Tender," quietly at first, then louder as more voices joined. It spread like a prayer. In that moment, Elvis wasn't a headline or a legend. He was a human being, a man who loved, lost, and found peace in one last letter. And Priscilla, she wasn't the widow of a star. She was the keeper of his truth. After the crowd left, she walked alone toward the meditation garden. The moon hung low, silvering the marble stones. She knelt, placed a single rose where his name was carved, and whispered, "You learned to love me right after all." For a second, the wind stilled. Then, from somewhere deep inside the house, a single piano note rang out, soft, clear, and unmistakable. She smiled through her tears. Maybe it was just the wind. Maybe it wasn't. But she knew one thing. The world would keep hearing that note, long after the music stopped. Because some love stories don't end. They echo across generations. The letter he left was more than paper. It was proof that even kings kneel before the truth. And the truth was simple. Love is never lost. It just waits to be heard. So if you have something left unsaid, say it. Don't let silence steal your goodbye. The king's final words were never meant for millions. They were meant for one woman. But somehow, they found all of us And maybe that's the real legacy he left behind. If this story moved you, share it with someone you've loved, lost, or almost lost. Maybe they need to hear it too. And if you've ever held back words that mattered, let this be your sign. Say them before it's too late.